Hey everybody, I am hopping on to tell you about something new that I'm about to do starting today. We are going to, or I'm going to, tell you about and answer questions for people about homeschooling, who, what, when, where, why, all of those things on Wednesday. So today I'm starting with just our own story. Why did we start homeschooling? We actually started homeschooling right off the bat with our oldest daughter. She never went to public school, but it wasn't as easy as all that. I was actually working in a public school, directing theater, and when Destiny was turning 4, I had some friends. We were at somebody's house and we were standing around in the kitchen, and I had some friends asking me, "Well, what are you going to do with Destiny? Is she going to go to public school? Are you going to homeschool her? What are you going to do?" And so, since I was working at the public school, I thought, well, I will just put her in the public school that I'm working in. It just made sense. So, then all these questions started to come. Well, aren't you afraid that she's going to learn some behaviors that you might not really want her to learn, or aren't you afraid that her faith is going to be questioned? And aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? Then the other side came in with the homeschooling. Well, if she homeschool, aren't you afraid that your child's going to be unsocialized? Aren't you afraid that they're not going to have any friends? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? Aren't you afraid? So that day, I realized that all these questions had afraid in them. And I decided that day that I was not going to make this choice in fear. I was not going to make a choice of if I was going to public school my daughter or homeschool my daughter in fear. So that day I came into a crossroads of um, making that choice. And all of a sudden, this weight that was on me that I didn't even realize was on me was lifted. I had been battling with the decision for quite some time on my own, mostly because my husband was homeschooled for quite some time by his mother. And then she moved him into a Christian school because she worked in a Christian school, and then high school he went to public school. I was public schooled all my life, and I didn't become a Christian until I went to college. And so we had these two very different upbringings, and we had to make a choice of how are we going to bring up our daughter, and later on the rest of the 5. And so that day I just had this peace that came over me that I decided I'm not going to make this choice in fear. However, later on that year, as the time came closer and closer, we got through summer and into winter, and the beginning of winter, and I started to fear winter in Minnesota. I don't know if you've ever been to Minnesota summer. You're from Minnesota summer. You may not be from Minnesota, but in Minnesota, the snow gets high and it's freezing cold. You don't take your child outside for long periods of time, especially a toddler, and the wind is biting, and it's just, if you ever seen New in Town, that's a good illustration of what it's like here in Minnesota. And so I was fearful of winter. And so I just started to try to brainstorm about what could I do to keep them busy during winter. My mom hopped on board and we ran to the dollar store. At that point was 45 minutes away. So we ran to the dollar store and we got all of these arts and crafts and things to do to preoccupy my children, like with a craft a day throughout the winter. So we would have some structure, and we were learning our alphabet, and we were learning our colors, and we're learning our shapes. And during that time, I ended up starting working, teaching them about the fruits of the spirit. And so that's when that curriculum started to come out too, or walk its way through into our life. And so with that, I just realized as we started to end winter, and I realized we're already doing it. We're homeschooling. And so we just took the next step in faith. And we just kept walking it out. We just kept taking the next step. And so that's just really how it all happened for us. If you know anybody who's homeschooling, ask them their story. I'm sure they would love to share it with you if you're considering to homeschool yourself. Everybody has a story. It's kind of like everybody has a story about how they met their husband or how they, every pregnancy story, everybody has a story. And so ask people their stories. They love to share. And I would just encourage you to never make any choice in your life, if it's about homeschooling or anything else, never make it in fear. Never make it in a place of anxiety. Always make it from a place of peace. So here we are on Wednesdays, and we are going to be sharing with you and answering questions about homeschooling. So if you have any questions, please make sure you comment below. Also, if you're interested in visiting my blog, it is the Pollard Tribe blog spot, and we would love to hear from you. So please ask away. If you have any questions at all, we would love to hear from you. Thanks. Have a great day.